You see that up there in the corner? Just a big puddle of gold on the edge there. That's really cool. God, seeing this right off the bat, I bet we might find some really nice ones.
You won't believe what just happened in the Yukon. Parker Schnabel, the 30-year-old mining legend, just pulled off something that shouldn't even be possible. We're talking about a $220 million gold discovery on ground that everyone else had given up on. And here's the crazy part. He almost didn't dig there at all. This isn't just another big cleanup. This is the kind of find that happens maybe once in a lifetime, if you're lucky. The kind that rewrites the record books and makes veteran miners question everything they thought they knew about gold. So, how did a piece of land that 3 different mining operations abandoned turn into the biggest discovery in gold rush history? Before this story gets even crazier, hit like and subscribe, because discoveries like this don't come twice. The weigh-in that changed everything. It's mid-season, and Parker's already feeling the pressure. Operating costs are insane. He's burning through $100,000 every single day just to keep the machines running. Fuel costs alone, 15 grand a day. And the ground he's been working is producing maybe 150 ounces a week. Decent, but nowhere near enough to cover his massive bills and turn a real profit. Then comes the routine Wednesday cleanup. His crew fires up the smelter, starts processing the concentrates, and begins weighing the gold. The first batch hits the scale, 287 ounces. That's already a strong number for a single day's worth of concentrates. But they keep weighing. Second batch, 312 ounces. Third batch, 294 ounces. Mitch, Parker's longtime foreman, looks at the scale and says, "Something's wrong, run it again." They zero out the scale, check the calibration, weigh the same gold again. The numbers don't change. By the time they finish the entire cleanup, they're looking at 1,847 ounces. That's not for the week. That's from 3 days of running pay dirt. That's almost $4 million from half a week of work. Parker's sitting there doing the math in his head, and he knows if the ground keeps producing like this, they're not just having a good season. They're sitting on something historic. The ground nobody wanted. Here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't prime real estate. This was a claim that had been passed around like a bad penny for nearly 20 years. First, there was an outfit called Northern Gold that worked it from 2003 to 2007. They pulled out maybe $2 million total across 4 seasons, then walked away saying the ground was tapped out. Then in 2011, a crew from Vancouver tried it. They lasted 1 season, recovered about 380 ounces, and declared it unprofitable. The most recent operator before Parker. They worked it in 2018 and 2019, got frustrated with heavy clay that kept clogging their equipment, and abandoned the lease. When Parker's land agent brought him this option, even his own team was skeptical. His lead geologist looked at the old reports and said, "Parker, there's a reason 3 different crews gave up on this. The clay is 12 to 15 feet deep in places. Most of it's frozen solid, and the numbers don't justify the work." But here's the thing about Parker. He doesn't just trust what other people tell him. He looks at the drill logs himself, and he notices something weird. The data everyone missed. Those old drill logs from the 90s showed decent gold in certain spots. That's actually really good gold. But every previous operator had focused on the shallow gravel near the surface, where it was easier to mine. What Parker noticed was that the deepest drill holes, the ones that went down 18 to 22 feet, showed something completely different. Exceptional gold. The kind of numbers that, if they held consistent across a large area, would represent a world-class deposit. But here's why everyone missed it. Those deep holes were right in the middle of the heaviest clay overburden. To get down to that gold, you'd need to strip away massive amounts of frozen clay and worthless gravel first. It would cost a fortune, take weeks longer than normal, and require equipment most miners don't have. 3 different crews looked at that data and said, "Not worth it." Parker looked at the same data and said, "What if they quit right before they hit the jackpot?" The decision that risked everything. Here's where Parker makes the call that either makes him a genius or costs him his entire season. He's got 2 active cuts running. One is producing steady gold. Nothing amazing, but reliable. It's generating about $600,000 a week, which covers most of his costs and keeps things stable. The smart, safe play is to keep mining there. But Parker decides to pull his biggest excavator, a massive cat that costs $22,000 a week just to lease, off the producing ground and move it to this new, unproven area. His advisors think he's crazy. His wash plant operator, Chris, tells him straight up, "If this doesn't work, we're going to be in a hole we can't dig out of." Parker's response, "I know, but if I'm right, we're not going to need to dig out of any holes." He commits 3 excavators, 2 bulldozers, and his entire hauling fleet to stripping this new ground. The cost? Around $150,000 just for the first week of moving dirt with 0 gold production. During that time, it takes 6 days of non-stop work to punch through the frozen clay, 6 days of burning money with nothing to show for it. Then, on day 7, they finally break through to pay gravel. The first signs. The pay layer isn't what anyone expected. Instead of the typical 3 to 4 feet of gold-bearing gravel, this layer is 7 feet thick in some places, and it's dense, really dense, the kind of material that makes the excavator work hard to rip through it. Parker's excavator operator, Rick, radios in. "This dirt is heavier than anything we've run all year. I think we're into something good." They run test pans right there in the pit. Parker grabs a bucket of gravel, runs it through a small test sluice they keep on site, and starts panning out the concentrates. First pan. Visible gold immediately. Not just flakes, actual chunky pieces, maybe 40 to 50 pieces in one pan. Second pan, even better. He counts over 60 pieces, including a nugget about the size of a pencil eraser. Third pan, 70-plus pieces, 2 bigger nuggets. For context, when you're test panning good ground, you're hoping to see maybe 15 to 20 pieces per pan. This is 3 to 4 times that. Parker looks up at his crew and doesn't say anything. He just nods and points at the excavators. The message is clear. Dig faster. The gold that breaks the rules. By the end of the first week running this new pay, they process their normal amount through the wash plant. But the gold recovery, 2,340 ounces. That's almost $5 million from 1 week of running pay dirt. But it's not just the quantity, it's the quality. Parker sends a sample to the assay office in Whitehorse. Most Yukon gold is about 75 to 85% pure. This sample comes back at 92% pure gold. That's incredibly unusual for placer deposits, and it means the gold barely needs refining before sale. He's getting nearly full price for every ounce, and the size of the gold, while most of his crew is used to seeing fine gold, almost like powder, and small flakes, this stuff includes nuggets, lots of them. His biggest single piece from this ground weighs almost 5 ounces. That one nugget alone is worth over $9,000. The $220 million calculation. After 3 weeks of consistent production, Parker brings in a geological engineering firm to properly evaluate what he's sitting on. They drilled 23 new test holes across the claim, going deep, some down to 28 feet, to map out the full extent of the deposit. The results are stunning. The gold-bearing layer extends across roughly 14 acres of the claim, and it maintains an average thickness of over 6 feet. The engineers calculate they're looking at over 300,000 cubic yards of pay material, all of it showing exceptional gold. The engineering firm runs their projections. They factor in Parker's recovery rates, his operating costs, everything. Their conservative estimate, $220 million in profit. That's not revenue. That's what Parker gets to keep after paying for everything. To put that in perspective, most successful gold rush miners feel great if they clear $5 million in a season. $10 million is incredible. $15 million is legendary. Parker's looking at $220 million. The Super Channel discovery. So how did this much gold end up in one place? The geologists explain it like this. About 15,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a massive river system that drained multiple mountain ranges in this part of the Yukon. This wasn't a small creek. This was a river potentially a mile wide in some sections. As this ancient river flowed, it carried gold eroded from veins high in the mountains. The gold, being heavy, would settle in specific spots where the river slowed down, usually at bends or where the channel widened. Over thousands of years, gold accumulated in these natural traps. Then, as the Ice Age ended, glacial movement buried the entire river system under layers of clay, gravel, and debris. What Parker found is what geologists call a super channel, a particularly rich section of this ancient river system where gold concentrated heavily. The previous miners? They'd been digging on the edges of this channel, hitting the spillover zones where gold was present but scattered. Nobody had punched down deep enough, in the right spot, to hit the main channel itself. Parker, almost by accident, started digging right on top of the richest section. One geologist on the evaluation team put it this way: if you were going to design the perfect scenario for a gold discovery, you couldn't plan this better. Parker landed on the bullseye. The race against time, but finding the gold and recovering the gold are two completely different challenges. Parker's got maybe 10 to 12 weeks left in the mining season before winter shuts everything down. To extract the full value, he needs to process over 300,000 cubic yards of pay before the ground freezes solid. Current production rate, about 4,500 yards per week. At that pace, he'd need 70 weeks. He doesn't have 70 weeks, he has 12. So Parker makes another massive bet. He orders a second wash plant, a custom-built unit that costs nearly $2 million and takes 4 weeks to deliver and assemble. He brings in 2 more excavators at $20,000 each per week. He expands his crew from 18 people to 34, doubling his labor costs. His new weekly operating budget, close to $300,000. But his new production target, 12,000 yards per week, with both plants running. If he hits that target consistently, he can process over 140,000 yards before winter. That's over $200 million in gold value. After costs, he's looking at 90 to 95 million in profit from a single season. That would shatter every record in gold rush history. So what's the takeaway here? Parker Schnabel took a piece of ground that 3 different mining operations had abandoned as worthless, looked at data that everyone else ignored, made decisions that his own advisors thought were insane, and uncovered a $220 million gold deposit. Is it luck? Partly, sure. Nobody drills a hole and hits the absolute richest spot by pure skill alone. But it's also pattern recognition, it's understanding geology, it's being willing to take calculated risks when the data suggests something others missed. And it's having the guts to commit everything, time, money, reputation, when you believe you're right. This discovery doesn't just set a new standard for Parker's career. It changes how miners across the Yukon will evaluate ground for the next 20 years. Every abandoned claim, every piece of worthless land, every drill log that somebody dismissed. They're all getting a second look now. Because if Parker can find $220 million where everyone else saw nothing, what else is out there waiting to be discovered? That's the real legacy of this find. Not just the money. The reminder that sometimes the biggest opportunities are hiding in the places everyone else stopped looking.